Today we have a panel discussion here with all of our expert lab techs. We're going to be talking about weight loss, a very popular topic. So we're going to have Zoe host. We'll pass the questions on and we'll have a bit of a discussion and hopefully learn a lot.
So first question for Stephen. When a client is considering starting a weight loss protocol, how do you assess whether it is an appropriate intervention?
When clients ask for weight loss, sometimes it doesn't always automatically appear to be in their best interest. You'll get people coming in, especially women, who are already maybe in the underweight or normal category. They're asking for weight loss, but maybe they want muscle as well. Maybe they have a history of eating disorders and they're really just looking to be skinny. In that case, I might try to reframe. They might be better off actually thinking about changing their body composition or even gaining weight. In general, using BMI is a pretty easy way to gauge whether or not somebody really should be thinking about weight loss. If you're underweight or in the normal range or even sometimes overweight, that doesn't always necessarily mean you're in an unhealthy spot. If you're maybe obese or if you have health issues, you should start looking at weight loss more seriously.
Sometimes if they have two goals, which are weight loss and muscle gain or strength gain, and they prefer gaining muscle sooner over losing weight sooner, and you can't do both at the same time, ideally most of the time. So you might just go in one direction and then come back to the weight loss after they've gained some muscle.
I think kind of to add and maybe have a little bit of an opposing side to the BMI. I mean, not opposing, it's definitely a good tool, but I think that at the same time, whenever I was shorter and quite stocky and muscly, whenever I was in a lot of athletics and such in high school, it told me that I was overweight. And luckily I knew that I wasn't, but with that being said, it's definitely not the only tool that you want to use. So I think, for instance, just measurements around waist to hip circumference, for instance, that's going to be a good indicator, in my opinion, on, whether or not somebody should be looking in the direction to gain or lose weight.
Body fat's generally not helpful. Like if you have a strength sport and you're a strongman, I'll give you that, or a powerlifter, I'll give you that. If you're a weightlifter, CrossFit, any other sort of bodybuilder, probably it's not as helpful as you think it is. So measuring where you're storing your body fat becomes much more important than just the fact that you have some or that you weigh a particular number or anything like that. So I would say considering where your body fat is stored is probably just as helpful, and earn your carbs.
I would just add to that with BMI and even waist circumference, some people, there is such a thing as skinny fat. Genetically, certain populations are more prone to get much bigger and kind of store the fat outwards. White people, for example, and other populations, you'll find they won't actually build so much up in their subcutaneous fat, which is the less unhealthy fat, and instead it'll go more towards the visceral fat. And you can be just as unhealthy at maybe a low BMI or a decent waist circumference as somebody who's overweight or obese, but maybe is active and all their health indicators are fine. So there's certainly a lot of things to consider.
Second question is for Ben. What are the best and worst strategies to approach weight loss and why?
Start with worst. Just not eating at all and cutting way too many calories at a time. If you're too aggressive with your weight loss and you try to lose it all at once by going like a 1,000 calorie deficit or even more than that maybe sometimes, then you're kind of just setting yourself up for failure when it comes to adherence, but also you're kind of screwing yourself over with lowering your metabolism, because your body will adapt to those lower calories, and then when it comes time to stop losing weight, you're eating way less as a baseline. So you're kind of putting yourself in a worse position, and it's just terrible for your health as well and performance. And best would be a small calorie deficit. Honestly, the longer you take to lose weight, the better it could be in terms of adherence, because you're just eating more food. So especially with people who struggle to eat less, like myself, a prolonged weight loss phase could be more beneficial.
Alongside some healthy eating strategies, I know it's been kind of talked about back and forth. It's controversial, but the 80-20 rule, I think, is generally pretty safe to go by, meaning that, 80% of what you're eating is fairly healthy. Maybe that 20% lower end is not binging on the weekends, but maybe allowing the odd time that you're going out and having, drinks with friends, or maybe at events, like eating the foods that you want. So I definitely don't see food as bad food. It's quality versus quantity, definitely. So you want to make sure that you're eating the right foods. So yeah, I think that a healthy eating strategy can definitely follow the 80-20 at most times. And yeah, I think logging, I always say to people that you're not needed to be logging or tracking your food forever. It's maybe not sustainable for most people, I'd say, but definitely doing it, especially if you're seeing maybe some gut health issues, sensitivities, stuff that's maybe not going in the right direction in terms of your goals. So maybe just logging for a short amount of time, whether it's a few weeks or a few months at most, just to kind of see and steer yourself in the right direction of where you want things to go.
The best strategy for dieting is also the worst strategy for dieting, which is self-awareness. That's what it all boils back to. You can pick whatever strategy you want. If you don't have self-awareness, it's over. If you have self-awareness, you're going to make it work. That's the whole story.
I would just add, especially to some of the worst, I think, definitely starvation diets, like eating like 500 calories a day, you're going to be much worse off than even if you were just like prolonged fasting. Ozempic is a popular appetite suppressant drug just in the past couple of years. That's a great way to take a pill, lose a bunch of weight, but you end up with kind of an alarming loss of muscle, way more than you would get even in a regular crash diet. Gastric bypass surgery maybe, can be useful for certain people, but there's a high rate of regression. People after a few years getting back to exactly where they were before because they never dealt with the behaviors and the mindset in the first place that were leading them to where they got. Lying on food logs to yourself is a big one, or to your trainer. People can really lie to themselves into thinking they're following a plan when they're really not. Like Ashley said, 80-20 rule, great. I find stress management for sleep, especially if you're getting good sleep, if you have good routines, then most other things can fall into a place a bit easier. Or like you could give yourself a rule, never do two bad things back to back, right? Maybe you go out for a night, you get wasted and you have poutine or whatever. Just the next day, go back to the gym, pick it up, eat healthy, get back on the horse. I personally like to incorporate treats into my day. I give myself a rule of 2 gummies after a meal, and I just limit myself to that, and I feel satisfied after that.
Being aware of what works for you and what doesn't. For you, 2 gummies after a meal might be a great idea. For someone like me, if I had 2 gummies, the whole package would be gone. So I know that when I'm on a diet, I can't touch certain foods. Some people can have like a bite of something and they'll be like, their cravings will be satisfied, and others, when they have a bite, they just need more, and then they ruin the whole diet.
Right.
So yeah, awareness of your tendencies and what you can and cannot do.
Right, knowing your limits, yeah.
Ash, what are some key metrics to monitor for clients attempting to lose weight?
Well, it's interesting because actually I remember back whenever I was in high school, they used to actually look at the sum of 5 skin folds. As much as that, for one, can be super accurate with a skilled trainer doing it, it also has a large room for error. As well as like for us trainers, it's really intrusive. As well as it's uncomfortable. You're literally pinching people in certain areas to measure their fat. So, it's definitely not ideal. With that being said, there are some types of calculators online and such that you can put in the circumference of, I think it asks like your waist, it will ask hips for females, chest for males, and then it gets like your neck, your body weight, your height, your age, and your gender. So, that takes in some pretty good factors and is going to likely be a good estimation, but even then, so it's still an estimation.
Your KPIs should be defined by what's actually going to keep you in the process. So they shouldn't be defined by any textbook or particular measurement. They should be defined by what do you need to actually stay on track, and are you doing it?
Some of the things that might help you keep on track that aren't, specific and measurable objective measurements, like, the body weight and hip to waist ratio. So, for some people, those might be like the driving factors. Like, I really want this ratio. But for most people, it's going to be things more like energy, how they feel, are they recovering? Are they getting better day to day? Are they feeling stronger in their life, able to do more? These are things that you can kind of subjectively track. And then, of course, like Ashley mentioned, hip to waist ratio, the scale, body fat percentage, those are all kind of objective measures. But like Colin said, they aren't necessarily going to be the things that keep people on track.
The obvious body weight on a scale. Not so much to see how much you're losing day to day, but just to see that you're trending downwards and not staying the same, to make sure that the weight loss diet is actually effective. And then calories and macros could also be important, especially calories, because if you're not tracking calories and you're just kind of intuitively eating, your success rate is probably going to be lower. Macros, I think, could be important during a weight loss period, and you don't need to track all these all the time. Sometimes just changing some habits in your diet could result in weight loss, but these are things that you probably should be tracking if you're trying to strategically lose a certain amount of weight in a certain amount of time. For macros, it would be for health reasons. So make sure you're eating enough fats so that you have healthy hormone levels and all that. Protein and carbs, you need both. And when you're on a diet, it's easy to undereat in any of those three categories.
Should the scale actually be going down as well is the question, because like a lot of us are aware of, muscle mass is a lot heavier than fat. So like I remember one time somebody had a really good visual that I could hold at some like table stand going on at an event, and like the muscle was 5 pounds and the fat was 5 pounds, but you were holding like this nice small smooth piece of muscle and like a very large lumpy type of fat piece. So it just kind of goes to show, like, if you are also trying to gain muscle, you actually might be going up on the scale. But again, taking in those other factors like your measurements, your energy, and how you feel when you look in the mirror and when you wake up and such, I mean, those are all going to be tell-alls of whether you're actually going in the right direction or not.
You might be losing fat while the scale goes up.
How can different types of exercise or training protocols influence weight loss, and how do you approach programming as a coach?
If one of your main goals is weight loss, that's going to be handled in the kitchen. You shouldn't be relying on your training for your weight loss. It will matter a little bit, but it's almost negligible. Same goes for the difference between cardio and strength training. There is a difference. You'll get a little bit more calories burned with cardio than strength training. Difference is kind of negligible at the end of the day.
I don't program exercise for weight loss, but I do tell my clients that they change nothing about their lifestyle and nothing about their diet. If they introduce exercise, they'll probably experience at least some weight loss, just because they're increasing their energy expenditure by a little bit. So that's always a first step. But then you do have to mostly make dietary changes to see any weight loss after that.
Looking at it as forming new habits, looking at it as a general thing for your lifestyle as opposed to just focusing on the weight loss itself, because yeah, it really will help you form new habits and routines. It comes down to like your creativity when you're cooking, maybe like finding yourself new recipes and such.
You'll often hear that building muscle, strength training will help you become kind of more of a furnace for calorie burning, and you'll burn more just at rest just because you have more muscle, because muscle is more expensive. That is true, but again, the difference is kind of negligible. Muscle burns like 3 times more than fat, but that only still represents a maximum 20 to 25% of your daily resting metabolism anyway. The rest of your body is burning a lot more calories, digesting, working your brain, breathing, heartbeat.
How do you determine calorie and macronutrient targets, and why?
Well, to lose weight, at the end of the day, you need less. You need to take in less than you expend. But on the other hand, calorie counting is kind of hell for most people, and not always realistic. But I think there is benefit to raising awareness in your clients who are looking for weight loss, of like what they're actually taking in currently, or if they're moving to a new nutrition plan, what that actually looks like to get to roughly to the calorie target that they're going for. So I personally like people tracking maybe at least a few days just to see what it looks like, see if they're way off from what they think they are. There are certain people with certain types of personalities that love tracking every little calorie, and it's easy for them, but most people it's not realistic. Standard protocol would be, calculate their estimated total daily energy expenditure, which takes into account their age, their weight, their height, their activity level, spit out a number, it's a guesstimate, give them a reasonable calorie deficit, maybe 500, maybe a little bit more if there's someone's morbidly obese, maybe a little bit less if they're a 90-pound, 18-year-old. Actually, at that point, they probably don't need to be losing weight at all. But yeah, it depends on the person. And you're also going to see how that target is going for like a month or so. If it's not working, then you adjust, because again, these are guesstimates.
I'll just talk about what I do to determine targets for calories and macros. Like Steven said, some people it might not be the best option for tracking all that, but for people who come to me and they do want to track it, or I think that tracking it could be beneficial for them, I normally get them to eat what they normally eat for 2 weeks and just learn how to track, practice putting in all their meals and all their food into some kind of calorie tracking app. And then after 2 weeks, we see if there's any weight change, looking at averages from week to week, not daily changes. And if there's no changes, most of the time there isn't, they're eating what they normally eat, then that average of the 2 weeks is normally their maintenance. And then from there we go slightly below maintenance to create a deficit, and the macros are based on how many calories they're eating. Percentages to make sure that they're eating enough fat, or carbs and protein. And then they kind of have a range of protein, carb, or fat that they can eat in. And as long as they're in that range, they could eat more carbs one day, more fat another day, and they're good.
Whether it's a trainer that gives it to you or whether clients or just people in general are looking online, a lot of times there's a lot of abbreviations, and one that I think is important, you mentioned maintenance, that is where you see TDEE, and that's your total daily energy expenditure. So basically that just means that we're putting a bunch of numbers into a fancy little equation that is going to spit out, if you wanted to basically stay the same right now, if somebody's happy where they're at, that amount of calories is going to be what you need to continue doing and consuming, as well as your exercise levels, to stay there. So with that deficit, that's all we're doing, is simply taking away the amount of calories from your TDEE and taking that deficit, or for somebody wanting to gain weight, adding that extra amount of calories in. And then, like mentioned, just separating out for the goals, whether somebody wants to get really muscular and build the hypertrophy, then maybe it's going to be upping the protein as well as carbs, because the person's going to be moving a lot. You just kind of have a different way of divvying up the carbs, fats, proteins.
How should we prioritize quantity and quality of calories when thinking about nutrition?
Well, if you're trying to lose weight, then you need to be in a calorie deficit. If you're trying to gain weight, a surplus. If you're fine the way you are, maintenance. And you don't always need to track. You could just be eating normally if you're not specifically trying to go too far in either direction. At the end of the day, it's calories in versus calories out that'll determine whether or not you're losing or gaining weight or staying the same. For quality, eating mostly healthy foods is good, and some people can eat all healthy foods, but others, we were talking about the 80-20 rule earlier. Some people having a little bit of a treat mixed into their diet could help with adherence and just following a diet in general.
So in terms of the calories in versus calories out, I'd say a good 99% of the time that is the case, but you also have people that have like health implications or various factors. This can be anything from like menopause for women, POS, you have different things such as diabetes and such, that like all of these things can be impacting. And again, maybe it's not a huge amount, but maybe their weight loss, even medications themselves that can then impact the weight loss. So I think, if we're just as like dry as saying that it's always in versus out, then we're not really looking outwardly at the ones that might be the outliers. So yeah, I think that's important. Quantity versus quality. I mean, it's probably common sense to know we should be eating healthier choices. Basically anything that's from like produce section and the outside aisles. I think it's actually Stephen that kind of put that one in my head, that it's true. You're usually seeing your healthier stuff in the grocery stores on the outsides, whereas the inside's always going to be your like chips and things that are filled with like sugars and cereals and boxed goods and such. So, and not to say that these things again are bad foods, it's just, is that the only area that we shop, or are we getting that healthy stuff? Because at the end of the day, you can be adding up all your calories and stuff, and if it came from all junk, what types of carbs, what types of fats. There's fats in a chip bag and there's fats in an avocado. So where are we getting it from?
Calories obviously matter, but like, I think for most people, if you just tell them to focus on high protein and every meal is planned around a big chunk of protein, focus on whole foods, maybe even switch to organic, you're going to get like 90% of the way there, especially with people that aren't mentally geared towards calorie counting and really strict adherence. Just telling them that those three things will do a lot of the work for you instead of having to lay out like a rigid meal plan. And, like what Ashley was saying, sometimes foods and ultra processed foods especially, or processed foods like dairy and bread can wreak havoc on specific populations, certain people, oftentimes that don't even realize they have sensitivities, triggering issues with hormone balance, inflammation, sometimes immune responses. That can all add to someone's stress, and if that adds to their stress, it might affect their sleep, and if that affects the sleep, then it might affect their weight loss and their muscle building, their recovery. So this is all recipe for disaster. For example, me, I loved milk all growing up. I still love milk, but at a certain point I realized my body was reacting very weirdly to regular milk. And I was like, oh, I must be lactose intolerant. I wasn't lactose intolerant. I took a test, and I was like, what the hell's going on? I ended up switching to organic milk. All of a sudden, all my strange digestive and mucus problems, heart problems went away just from switching to organic. The quality of food can definitely affect your life, and therefore your stress, and therefore your weight loss.
Ashley, what are the initial primary behaviors clients should consider when changing their relationship with food?
I'd say for one, showing up. Whether that's in the kitchen and cooking your own food for yourself instead of ordering out so much, or whether that's making your way to the gym more. Whether it's getting in bed earlier, which is definitely one that I suffer from myself. We have to be showing up for ourselves. That consistency is definitely important. And it's, of course, easier said than done, but taking the small steps to get into that direction. For myself, it might be like backing up my sleep 20 minutes each night and waking up 20 minutes earlier. There's lots of small things that you can do in order to reach the goals. Yeah, that's a good one. I'd like to hear what other people have to say before I go too much into it.
A sense of control. Sometimes people with bad family or environmental situations will use food and controlling food and calories as a way to cope. I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but that is how it often manifests. As for behavior, best results will happen with behavior modifications, meal prepping, chewing slowly, don't have bad options in the house. Yeah, just don't have snacks around and you won't cheat if you're that type of person. Upping water intake will help you feel fuller more often. Also just good for hydration. Don't eat when distracted. Like, don't make a meal, put Netflix on, put a YouTube video on, which I always do. And that's a great way to just like, you're to put yourself with your meal and say, do I want to eat these next few bites? And often the answer might be no. But if you're just distracted, paying attention to something else, you might just keep shoveling it in and not have that awareness. And then thinking about it as adding good foods instead of cutting bad foods. Because if you think about it in a positive light, like humans are naturally kind of rebellious. So if you give yourself a bunch of rules, I can't do this, I can't do that, you're more likely to rebel. But if you're just adding good foods, well, if you're adding lots of meat, lots of spinach, and high fiber foods or whatever, then you're less likely to fit those bad foods into your meal plan. Don't eat past a certain time. You can give yourself a rule there. That works for a lot of people. We've mentioned ultra processed foods a couple times. The reason they're so bad is not because they're like naturally automatically going to make you fatter or more sick. It's because they're designed in such a way as to make you crave and eat as much as possible. They're hacking into our primal instincts and just making us tend to overeat than we would otherwise if you're just eating regular whole foods. Mindfulness, of course, can be better than calorie counting and strict meal plan. Noticing how you feel when you're hungry, when you have a craving, noticing what it's like to eat the food that you're putting in your face.
Water, like Steven said. Meal prep, if you prepare your meals in advance, then you kind of already have set what you're going to eat throughout the day or the week. So that could be a helpful strategy. Knowing yourself, so knowing that you snack a lot at night or a lot in the morning or when you're watching YouTube videos or whatever, and then maybe trying to make boundaries for yourself so you don't snack in those times where you're more apt to. Choosing healthy alternatives. So, for example, I love spinach dip. I just made last night a really high protein version, which was just lower in calories, higher in protein, still hit the spot. Getting caught up in the or not getting caught up in the numbers. A lot of my clients get caught up in the number on the scale, the number of calories they're eating, all that. Not worrying about, especially the scale, is a good behavior
Changes
because
so much day to day.
Yeah, day to day, water, food, sleep quality, everything affects the number on the scale. So looking at trends over time, not the day to days. Some days you're going to look in the mirror and you're going to be bloated and think that the weight loss isn't working, but really it's just because of the meal you ate right before. Drinking calories, you can either do that or not do that depending on your goals, but if you're trying to lose weight, doing less of that is probably going to be beneficial, just for satiety. And sleep, getting enough sleep, and sometimes sleeping more just kind of closes off your day a little bit more, so it gives you less time to eat food, with the added benefit of helping you be healthy and all that. But all these behaviors, you don't need to do all these behaviors at once. Just choosing from a few of them, or whichever ones work best for you, could set you up for success.
Ashley, did you want to add?
One last thing that I did have to say is that, yeah, maybe like behavior / mentality kind of change is, I think Ben said earlier about kind of the people that forget to eat and how that actually can impact you negatively because you're actually slowing down your metabolism and so forth. Yeah, I mean, food is fuel, so, not allowing yourself to forget, that's a big one as well, because I know that I've definitely come across people that maybe are sitting on the end of wanting to lose weight, but surprisingly enough, they're not eating enough. So, changing the behavior and understanding, and I mean, even if you are still on the end of eating too much, just understanding that your food is your fuel, so kind of changing that relationship as opposed to food is just calories. Look at it as like, you are a car and you need gas. So what are you going to do with it? Are you going to circle around the block 10 times, or are you going to go for a long, nice, big trip?
How do you navigate the tension between fitness and health and the pressures from the weight loss industry, media, or social media?
If you're navigating the effect of your environment on you, the first thing you need to do is change your relationship with the environment. So if you know that social media is going to drag you down, stay off social media. What matters more, your presence on social media or your progress in your life? Decide, and then navigate. That's how I think about that.
The type of society we live in is one that incentivizes companies finding ways to make you feel bad about what you are and who you are, and then offering you a solution that you pay for. You can buy your happiness, you can buy the body you want. They kind of create the problems too. That's really tough. You can tell people, don't compare yourself to others. That's a human instinct. You can't really not compare yourself to others, but maybe focus on your journey, focus on you being better than you were yesterday. I often get people saying, they'll come in and they'll be like, I want to look like this body or this person. And, genetics play a big role in what people look like, fat distribution, your limb length, your hips and your rib cage, all kind of things. So you have to kind of set expectations for, you are not some other person. You can be the best version of yourself. You can't be someone else.
Knowing what you want and why you want it. Do you want something because your social media feed is full of it, or do you want it because you actually know that you can achieve it and it's something that will make you happier and feel better? A lot of the time, if you look like the people who are most popular on social media, you'd probably feel like shit. It's just, what do you value? Do you value strength? Do you value looking good? Maybe taking social media with a grain of salt. It's kind of like the top 0. whatever percent for every aspect of social media, whether it's cool tricks, looking good, being strong, whatever.
I think a huge portion of the social media stuff, whether it's actually on social media or 20 years ago, maybe it was looking at magazines and such. I think the point is here that things are changing constantly, everywhere in life. That's inevitable. So take for instance the fact that maybe just in the 2000s, it was tiny butts are in. Everybody wanted no ass whatsoever. So it's interesting to me to think that Like, and I mean, these goals take a long time for some people or most people to achieve. So like, does somebody look at that as wasted time then? Because they took 10 years trying to get something that then like next thing you know, new trend is in. So I think it's important to maybe not pay attention so much to the trends and just focus on the goal for yourself. The goal should always be, you know, being healthy, strong, capable, and able. And also, as far as like big business goes, there's a lot of gimmicks and like phony schemes out there and such. You know, there can be useful things out there, but there's also a lot of crap. So, yeah, I think, you know, whenever it says like easy this, like easy abs, and it's some weird little machine, you know, like, you know, again, not to say that some things may not, might work. It's just that I think we need to realize a goal actually, like a good true goal actually shouldn't really be super easy to get to. It should be hard. You know, in the gym, being in the gym and putting in time and stuff is hard. Otherwise people wouldn't be grunting and panting and puking on their way out. But, you know, it is hard. So I think that, you know, realizing that being strong and capable and able is a difficult thing to do, and you should be wanting to do it for yourself, not trying to take the goal of somebody else to look like somebody else because you want to be that person, you know.
Just want to add one more thing about social media. I mentioned social comparison is kind of innate to humans because we're social animals, but we were designed to relate to each other and compare to each other in a small tribe setting, 50 people max. But now we're on social media, on Instagram or Facebook. Now we're comparing ourselves to 6-7 billion people, and we're really not designed to handle that. That's a recipe for disaster. So just being aware of your internal incapacity to really cope with that in a regular way.
What do you wish more people understood when approaching weight loss?
Sleep. How important sleep is. If you don't get enough sleep, if you don't get enough quality sleep because of medications you're taking, drugs you're taking, or you're eating too late, or you're just getting up too early, or going to bed too late, this will raise your cortisol. This will lessen your ability to lose fat and increase your loss of muscle. Sleep is super important. It improves your energy, your mood, and then body composition matters more than the number on the scale at the end of the day. Those are the main two things I think people should take away.
One that I touched on earlier, but I wish way more people knew, is that the number on the scale is not necessarily indicative of you being in a place where you need to lose weight. The changes on the scale might not represent your weight loss very well. And then I wish more people knew that it could be done healthily. Some people associate weight loss with unhealthy behaviors, which is because sometimes weight loss is a result of unhealthy behaviors, but it can be done healthily as well.
Cardio is better is the number one thing that kind of came to my mind that a lot of people think with weight loss is going to help them. You know, that EPOC, which is like your afterburn, it's really only happening during the cardio portion, whereas, you know, studies have shown like prolonged up to, I think now it's like a day or two even, that you're continuously burning after your workout. So basically you're looking at it like another car analogy, that like whenever you turn off a vehicle, your engine's still hot for a while. If you're doing strength training, even if, you know, you're a lover of cardio, it's not to say that you can't be doing things that are upbeat and still putting you out of breath and making you sweat and such, but kind of including that resistance and strength training aspect is definitely important if weight loss is the goal. One that I find funny, and I even still catch myself saying it, is like the whole toned thing. People say, I just want to look toned. That's not a real thing. Like, that's just something that somebody came up with and like stuck. You're either losing fat or gaining fat. You're either losing muscle or gaining muscle, period. So, I mean, you're losing fat maybe around your arm area and gaining more muscle in your bicep. Look, my arms look more toned. No, you're just getting healthier. And last one is spot reducing. You cannot spot reduce. People will say, you know, I can't believe the amount of videos, especially from people that like, they likely do know, it kind of ties into the social media thing, that a lot of these people are actually pushing things that are not, like, it's fake news completely. Like, I've seen some mom pages, for instance, that, I mean, these people, again, likely know their shit, but they're saying, like, this is how you get rid of the FUPA, which I hate that name, but, you know, it's like, you can't actually just target that area. You can make it burn, don't get me wrong. You can build a core underneath, but in the long run, your body's going to decide where to take the fat from. Everybody's a little bit different, and the goal, of course, is to take it away from the abdomen area, as that's where the unhealthy fats are usually stored. But again, we just need to focus on the whole general body as opposed to this one spot or this one spot.
Clip that and send it to everyone's moms.
All the moms, yeah.
The thing that most people don't want to admit is that they already know what to do. It's hilarious to me when coaches try to approach their clients as idiots. We literally live in the information age where information is unbelievably cheap. Everybody already knows what they need to do. So that's not important anymore. So now that you feel like you've got permission to do what you need to do, I would encourage you to add more variation than the rest of the world is telling you. Take that as you may, but apply variation as a principle. And that from that point, as you're designing what you're going to do, I will tell you that your approach matters. Your starting point matters. And it's maybe more important to sort that out than kind of what happens next.
Yeah, okay. I did want to say one thing. So there is such a thing as toning, but it's terrible. You would absolutely not want to tone your biceps or your glutes or your legs or whatever. That's, hypertonicity is a state where your muscle is just kind of like permanently in contracted mode, and it's going to be painful and it's going to be tight. You won't be able to relax. No, yeah, they want to look toned, then they're not sure what that means exactly. You absolutely do not want super tight muscles. I have super tight muscles. It's terrible. I hurt all the time. Yeah. A toned person is a little hunchback basically. That's not what you want.
What separates successful and healthy weight loss from temporary or failed attempts?
Sometimes when people know about the calories in, calories out approach, and I feel like I've done this before, they think that they can just eat whatever as long as they hit a certain caloric goal, but actually making sure that at least most or part of your diet is nutritious options, healthy options rather than junk food, just because healthy options will most of the time make you more full and less likely to eat more. Choosing a diet that's prolonged or sustainable, especially sustainable, because if you can't sustain it, then you aren't losing weight versus, I guess, an unrealistic or too aggressive diet.
I think a huge thing, I kind of touched on it in one of the seminars I've done, is like, where's your motivation coming from? It's not to say that's going to be the end all, like, if you succeed or not. The different types of motivations can be a really great maybe starting factor. But for example, it's either extrinsic or intrinsic. Intrinsic meaning internally, like, is this something you want to do for you? Or extrinsic because, you were bullied into it, or you had, a family member or a significant other or an ex that, kind of pushed you in that direction. Again, there's going to be those natural instinctual things that maybe were even the driving factor, but you definitely don't want to be holding on to those things. You're not thinking like, oh, I can't wait to send my new weight or my new PRs or my new lifts to this person, or like, I can't wait to prove them wrong. It's like, it's a battle against yourself. And as cliche as it might sound, like, look to prove yourself wrong. Like, maybe you never knew that you could lift 200 pounds, or maybe you never knew that you'd actually be able to achieve and stick to a certain adherence. So I think that, really in the end, it's important to know where your motivation and driving factors are coming from.
It's a straightforward answer, and it's not a fun one. The thing that creates a successful program is effort. The thing that creates sustainable change is effort, and therefore the underlying thing behind that effort is behavior change. If you really want to know what's going to change in order for this to work, it's you.
Yeah. Ashley and Colin both touched on the importance of like your readiness to change, your willingness to make fitness and behavior change part of your identity, if not your whole identity. You have to be in that mindset and have the readiness to do it. I think another big factor that we haven't mentioned yet is support networks and your relationships. You don't build a house, I don't know, what's the damn saying? You don't build a house by yourself. No, that's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. Takes a village to raise a child, yeah. But you get the point. At the end of the day, it is you that's got to be ready to change and make this transformation, but we don't ever really do anything on our own. We live in a society, we have family, we have other people we're dealing with. You're buying your products from the clerk at another store. These are all factors. So building your relationships, sustaining your relationships are going to be just as important, I think, because you're going to have setbacks, you're going to have hard times, things are going to go wrong, you're going to fail on your way to succeeding. And if you do that all alone, it's going to be tough. So having those people, having those networks is crucial.
Many studies show that having a buddy or person to even just like send your meal plans or like be excited about. That's why they even say that posting your workouts and whenever you're eating healthy and stuff and make a good meal. We're really not doing it to be like, oh, look, I'm great. It's actually an accountability factor. You're showing other people, sure, that you are doing better for yourself, so you're proud, you're allowed to be, but it's not just for the look at me, I'm good. It's actually going to be keeping you more in line.
Does anybody have any final thoughts?
The best diet for you is the diet that works best for you, and the diet that you can stick to. So it has to be something that you at least enjoy a little bit.
Right. Don't try to shove a square peg into a round hole. If the diet isn't working for you, find another one.
Yeah.
Rome wasn't built in a day. It's like, that's not the right one. All right.